Most women have been taught that love must be earned, that affection is a reward for effort, and that silence must be filled with words, attention with offerings, and distance with pursuit. But some women vanish into a mystery that no man can decipher. They don't chase, don't plead, don't shrink to fit into spaces too small for their essence. They withdraw, not out of fear, but out of a deep, ancient power that understands this. What is truly aligned does not need to be pursued. There is a kind of woman who becomes unforgettable precisely because she refuses to follow. She doesn't explain her silence or justify her absence. She moves like a myth, felt but never grasped, like a dream half remembered upon waking. And it's this mystery, this refusal to collapse into expectation, that lodges her in the psyche of a man like a haunting melody, looping, echoing, taunting. In Jungian terms, she is the embodiment of the anima not yet integrated, the projection that challenges a man's own unconscious by not conforming to his need for validation. She disrupts the archetype of the pleasing, ever-available feminine, and in doing so she forces him to face what he has not yet developed in himself: patience, depth, emotional sovereignty. She doesn't play the game of pursuit because her energy is not rooted in lack. She does not need to earn anyone's affection to prove her worth. She is seen through the illusion that love is transaction, and instead she becomes a mirror, not the kind that flatters, but the kind that shows a man who he truly is, what he avoids, what he seeks, what he fears losing most. And this is why some men become obsessed with her, not because she does something, but because she does not. Her refusal to chase activates a wound buried deep inside his own psyche. The mother wound, the abandonment trauma, the suppressed shame. In her absence, he meets himself. In her silence, his ego screams. In her stillness, the illusion of control crumbles. You see, when a woman chases, she forfeits her center. She places the locus of power outside herself. But when she remains in stillness, not passivity, but sovereign detachment, she becomes the axis around which everything else must revolve. She is no longer reacting, she is choosing. And choice, when made from self-possession, is the highest form of power. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole by integrating the unconscious aspects of themselves. This woman is well into her own individuation. She has walked the dark corridors of her psyche, confronted her shadow, held her brokenness with trembling hands. She has stopped waiting for someone to complete her. She is not half a soul, in search of a missing piece. She is the whole damn mosaic. And because of this, she cannot be manipulated by guilt, nor seduced by breadcrumb affection. She sees through the masks people wear when they don't yet know who they are. And if a man approaches her with pretense, with bravado masking fear, with charm that seeks to conquer, she will not chase. She will disappear, not because she plays hard to get, but because she is hard to reach. Her energy is earned not through pursuit, but through presence, through resonance, through a frequency that cannot be faked or forced. And this is where many falter. Men who are addicted to the chase, to the thrill of conquest, to the dopamine spikes of attention. They expect her to respond like the others, but she doesn't. She offers no reaction, no emotional currency to cash in, and in that void, they unravel. Because without someone to impress, without someone to control, they are forced to confront the hollowness within. To the man whose self-worth depends on admiration, her indifference is violence. But to the man who has done the inner work, her stillness becomes sacred. Her detachment becomes invitation, not to possess her, but to rise, to meet her where she dwells, to shed the ego's armor and offer presence, not performance, honesty, not charm, depth, not dominance, because the woman who never chases does not need a savior. She needs a mirror, one who has also descended into himself, one who has also buried parts of his soul and clawed them back. She doesn't need to be desired. She needs to be seen. And if you are that woman or becoming her, do not let the world shame your silence. Do not dilute your depth to be more digestible. Do not abandon your knowing to win shallow affection. You are not too much. You are not too cold. You are simply not for those who have not yet remembered how to feel. There is a sacred rage in the woman who no longer chases, not the kind that screams, but the kind that simmers beneath still water, the kind that comes from lifetimes of bending, shrinking, softening her voice just to be loved. She carries the memory of every time she was told to wait, to give more, to be less, to prove herself worthy of attention that should have been freely offered. And somewhere along the journey, she said enough. Not with words, but with her energy, with the way she started walking away from tables where she was only fed crumbs. In that moment, she shifted from persona to soul, from performance to presence. She no longer played the roles expected of her. Not the cool girl, not the desperate girl, not the mothering one who overfunctions just to keep love intact. She dropped the script, burned the costume, stepped off the stage. This is the death the ego fears most, the moment a woman stops seeking validation and starts remembering who she is. You can see it in her eyes, that distant fire, that unwavering calm, that quiet certainty that says, I am not here to impress you. I am not here to chase you. I am here to be. And this presence, this unshakable sovereignty, unravels the conditioning of every man still seeking his power outside himself. He may not understand it, but he feels it. An ache in the soul, a tension in the gut, a voice whispering, you cannot seduce what does not need you. This is the psychological crucible she creates, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. For she has seen the cost of self-betrayal and will not pay it again. Every time she chased, she lost a part of herself. Every time she begged for attention, she abandoned her own inner child. Every time she waited for a man to love her back to life, she died a little more inside. But no longer, because the woman who never chases has turned inward. She has sat in silence with her wounds, traced their origins, named their ghosts. She has peeled back the layers of false self and found the sacred within. Not perfect, but present. Not invulnerable, but whole. Her power is not in what she says, but in what she does not say. She does not defend her standards. She does not justify her detachment. She does not explain her absence. She simply removes herself from energies that do not match her frequency. And in this way, she becomes the ultimate initiator, not by chasing, but by being. She initiates a man into the deepest parts of himself by refusing to play the game of ego. She shows him what it means to connect without control, to love without possession, to witness without projection. But make no mistake, her absence is not a tactic. It is not a ploy. It is a boundary made sacred through fire and blood. She has learned, through unbearable silence and heartache, that chasing someone who cannot meet her is a violence against her own soul. And so she waits, not for him but for herself, for her truth to settle, for her clarity to speak, for her spirit to guide. There is a difference between indifference and embodiment. One is apathy, the other is mastery. She does not lack emotion, she has mastered it. She does not suppress her desire, she has purified it. And now, she no longer burns to be chosen. She chooses. And this, too, is why she cannot be controlled. The moment a man tries to trigger her insecurities, she meets him with silence. The moment he withdraws to gain the upper hand, she does not follow. She lets him disappear into his own game. For she is not competing for his affection. She is not proving her worth. She is observing, always observing. From this quiet vantage point, she sees everything, the flinches behind his charm, the wounds behind his cruelty, the fear behind his arrogance, and she does not try to fix him. She does not mother him back to emotional health. She lets him sit in his own unraveling, because she knows healing is not a performance and love is not rehabilitation. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The woman who never chases lives by this truth, she is no longer dragged by unconscious patterns, no longer seduced by the familiar ache of emotional absence. She has made her darkness conscious, and now it no longer runs the show. So she sits, not waiting, but resting, rooted in herself, knowing that if connection is meant for her, it will move toward her with reverence. Not coercion, not confusion, and never chaos. The men she once pursued now feel her absence like a void that echoes louder with time. Not because she withheld love, but because she no longer offered it where it wasn't honored. She no longer sends the long messages trying to explain herself, no longer reaches for hands that have already let go. The woman who never chases has learned the sacred art of letting go before she is destroyed. And this is the act that marks her as different, as dangerous to the ego, but liberating to the soul. She doesn't burn bridges, she simply watches them collapse under the weight of imbalance. For her love is no longer built on sacrifice, but on mutual recognition. Her tenderness is reserved for those who are emotionally safe. She doesn't crave the adrenaline of emotional highs and lows. She has matured beyond the addiction to pain dressed as passion. She has found peace, and now anything that threatens that peace is not tempting, but repelling. And yet her stillness is misunderstood. To the immature, it reads as pride. To the insecure, it feels like rejection. To the wounded, it's a challenge to conquer. But she is not a prize. She is a presence that cannot be earned through performance, nor seduced through manipulation. Because she has met too many charming men who knew how to touch her body but feared touching her soul. And now she no longer opens her energy to those who flinch at her depth. She is not guarded, she is discerning. This discernment was not born of bitterness, but of evolution, of walking away from the noise long enough to hear her own voice, of turning down the volume of everyone else's expectations and finally listening to the quiet wisdom inside her. The same wisdom that told her, love does not chase, it attracts. And attraction for her is no longer about aesthetics or attention. It is about energy, about presence, about how grounded someone is in their own truth. She reads frequency now, not words. Intention, not action. The unsaid, not the said. Men who once called her intense now remember her as unforgettable. Because she didn't flatter the ego, she confronted it. She didn't play easy, she mirrored back the hidden. She wasn't a temporary thrill, she was a rite of passage. And this is what they remember. Not her beauty, but her impact. The feeling of being seen, and not in the superficial way, but in the way that pierces through persona and touches the hidden shame, the repressed longing, the fractured masculinity yearning for integration. For in her refusal to chase, she says to him without words, "You are either ready for real love, or you are not. I will not carry you to it." This woman does not confuse silence with loss. She knows that letting go is sometimes the most intimate act of love, not for the other, but for herself. It's how she clears space for what is aligned, for what is real. She no longer clings. She clears. She no longer seeks closure. She becomes it. And it is here in this spaciousness that her power blooms, not loud or boastful, but magnetic. She begins to attract those who feel her, even in silence, who respect her boundaries because they see the sacredness in them, who are not intimidated by her independence, but inspired by it. But to be clear, she did not arrive here easily. This was not born in a moment, but in many. In late nights crying alone, realizing she was the only one still trying. In breaking her own heart by holding on to someone else's potential. In forgiving herself for every time she settled for less just to feel something. She has faced the darkness, not run from it. And in doing so, she found the version of herself who no longer begs to be chosen. She chooses. This shift from seeker to chooser is not about arrogance. It's about alignment. It's about knowing what you carry is sacred and not everyone is meant to hold it. It's about no longer casting your pearls before those who only want to admire, not understand. Who want to taste you but not digest the truth of you. Now she does not move to be understood. She moves to stay true. And those who see her, really see her. Do not ask her to chase. They draw near, they listen, they meet her where she already is. Because the woman who never chases has nothing to prove, and everything to offer, if you have the depth to hold it. There is a quiet revolution unfolding in the psyche of a woman who has reclaimed herself. She no longer bends to fit the projections of others, no longer contorts her essence to soothe fragile egos or stabilize broken men. The woman who never chases has stepped beyond the realm of romantic fantasy into something far more dangerous to the system. She has become whole within herself. And wholeness, for a woman, is the most radical act, because the world is not used to women who do not need. It is uncomfortable with women who do not hunger for validation, who do not crave attention, who are not willing to compromise their sacred for company. Her self-containment is misread as arrogance, her clarity as coldness. But the truth is, she has simply stopped bleeding for people who call it love. There is something deeply alchemical in her detachment. She has transmuted the wounds of abandonment into gold. She has taken every time she was overlooked, misunderstood, rejected, and forged from it a throne of self-worth that no man can pull her down from. Her worth is no longer a question up for negotiation. It is a knowing. She does not chase because she has nothing to chase. There is no void she is trying to fill, no fantasy she's desperate to live out. She no longer projects her unlived life onto a partner. She is not looking for someone to rescue her from her own depths. She has already rescued herself, and that terrifies those who are still governed by ego. Because when a woman is full in her own energy, when she radiates from within and asks nothing of anyone, she becomes untouchable. Not inaccessibly distant, but soulfully sovereign. The kind of woman who cannot be bought, tamed, or convinced. The kind of woman whose love is not for sale but for resonance. It's not a gift you can earn, it's a force you must rise to meet. Men who operate from the unconscious ego will try to test her, to see if she will chase when they pull away, to see if they can control her through silence, withdrawal, or hot and cold tactics. But she no longer plays that game. She doesn't lean in. She leans back, because she knows that every test of silence is a reflection of his fear, not her unworthiness. She lets him pull away, and she does not follow. She lets him grow distant, and she grows deeper into herself. She lets him try to manipulate, and she sees through the illusion. And this is not out of bitterness, it's out of clarity. She's not angry, she's awake. Jung taught that what we do not make conscious will manifest as fate. She is not repeating fate anymore. She's not replaying the father wound, the mother's silence, the abandonment story. She has brought light to the unconscious and now chooses from freedom, not fear. You can feel her presence in a room. It commands without words. She doesn't need to speak loudly to be felt. Her energy is deliberate, her aura unshaken. She is the storm before it breaks, calm, weighty, electric. The woman who never chases carries thunder in her bones and rain in her eyes, not to pour on anyone, but because she's weathered enough to know she is her own sky. She sees love not as salvation, but as expansion. She is not looking to be completed, she is looking to be met. If a man cannot meet her in her fullness, she does not shrink, she simply steps aside. For she knows that real intimacy cannot be forced, and attention born from manipulation will always breed resentment. She has watched men unravel in the face of her stillness, watched them project, retreat, lash out, try again. And through it all, she remains grounded, not because she feels nothing, but because she is ruled by something deeper than impulse. She has emotional discipline. She has excavated every buried part of her being and made peace with her own darkness. She has done her shadow work, and so she does not react from it. To a man still stuck in cycles of ego, she is a threat. To a man on the path of becoming, she is a mirror. And only those brave enough to look into that mirror without flinching can stand beside her. Because love, for her, is no longer about drama. It's about depth. It's about the quiet presence of someone who does not run from himself, who doesn't need her to dim her light to feel bright, who doesn't confuse control with care, who can sit in the stillness and feel. And when she meets someone like that, she doesn't chase, she chooses. There is something elemental about her presence now. She moves like the tide, steady, inevitable, unconcerned with approval. She knows that to chase is to betray her own rhythm, to abandon her own knowing. And so she doesn't. Not because she's playing a role, not because she's hardened, but because she has finally remembered her origin, the vast, wild, untamed essence of the feminine that cannot be caught, only met. This woman lives from her core. She does not perform her femininity, she embodies it. Not in the way culture expects, not soft to the point of self-erasure, not seductive to the point of losing clarity, but fierce, intuitive, grounded in truth. She can be warmth, yes, but only when it does not cost her her center. She can be open, but never to what wounds her. She no longer makes excuses for others' emotional immaturity. No longer plays therapist to those who refuse to face their own reflection. No longer builds temples for men to worship themselves in while forgetting her name. She has stepped out of the archetype of the wounded healer. She is not here to fix anyone. She is here to be. And in being, she awakens. In Jungian language, she has transcended the unconscious archetypes, the pleaser, the martyr, the seductress, and stepped into the self, the integrated soul, the divine feminine that no longer seeks completion in another. She is not numb. She has simply stopped outsourcing her life force. Her energy is precious, and she has learned the price of giving it to those who are not ready to hold it with reverence. The old self would have chased, would have over-explained, would have waited by the phone, dissected every word, doubted her worth. That version of her had not yet met the wound beneath the chase, the ache of not being enough, the inherited belief that love must be earned through sacrifice. She has now excavated that wound, named it, sat with it in the night, and in doing so she has freed herself from its pull. Now, when someone pulls away, she doesn't chase, she notices. She watches the movement, the energy shift, the disconnect. She doesn't panic. She doesn't plead. She observes. And that observation tells her all she needs to know. This woman is not hard, but she is boundaried. Her love is sacred. It is not a currency to barter for crumbs. It is not a drug to numb someone else's loneliness. It is a force, a life-giving current, and it will not be poured into broken vessels that refuse to hold themselves together. There is a gravity to her now, a stillness that speaks louder than words. When she walks away, she does not slam the door. She simply closes it with grace, and that silence echoes louder than any goodbye. It lingers, it haunts, because it is not born of anger. It is born of knowing. And the men who felt entitled to her attention suddenly find themselves exposed, stripped of the performance they once used to impress her. Without her gaze, they are confronted by the emptiness they tried to hide, because she never really wanted perfection. She wanted presence. She never chased to control. She chased because she didn't yet know she was enough. But she knows now. And so she lets things unfold without forcing. She lets people show who they are without needing to change them. She lets what is meant for her arrive without manipulation. Her trust is not in the other. It is in herself, in her intuition, in her boundaries, in her healing. This woman is not waiting for someone to understand her. She understands herself. And that is the rarest thing of all. To meet someone who has gone to the bottom of their own soul and returned, not bitter but clear, not guarded but sovereign. She no longer asks, "Why didn't he choose me?" She asks, "Why did I ever try to prove myself to someone who couldn't see me?" Because now she sees herself fully, without shame, without apology. And in seeing herself, she creates a resonance that only the deeply attuned can feel. Those who sense truth not in the noise, but in the quiet, in the still waters, in the space between words. And if you are that woman or becoming her, know this: your silence is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is the echo of every time you chose yourself, every time you held your standard, every time you let go of what didn't honor you. Your stillness is not passive. It is magnetic, and what is aligned will always move toward it. You do not need to chase. You do not need to prove. You only need to be. There is a moment, subtle, seismic, when a woman finally stops waiting, not just for a text or an apology or for someone to realize her worth, but waiting inwardly for someone else to activate her life. That moment is not loud. It arrives like a quiet breath at the end of a storm, a soft exhale that says, "I release you." Not just him, but every false story, every internalized belief, every wound that said she had to earn love by abandoning herself. The woman who never chases does not arrive here by chance. She walks through fire to reclaim this state. She burns away the need to be chosen. She dissolves the compulsion to explain. She buries the urge to chase. And in the ashes, something ancient rises, herself. Fully formed, fully feeling, fully free. Her presence is no longer transactional. It is devotional. Not to another, but to truth. She's no longer at war with herself. She no longer tries to be less intense, less emotional, less knowing. She has outgrown the phase of dimming. Now she illuminates, and with that illumination comes clarity. She sees how the chase was never about him. It was about the younger part of her who was still trying to rewrite an old story. The story that said, "If I can make him stay, I'll finally be safe." But now she writes a new story. One where safety is not found in another's presence, but in her own, in the sanctuary of her boundaries, in the wisdom of her discernment, in the power of her no. She no longer spends her energy trying to decode others. She no longer leaks her light, trying to keep love alive. Her worth is not negotiable, her time not disposable. She offers love, but not at the cost of her center. She holds space, but only for those who do the same. And in this grounded state, she becomes magnetic, not in the way that screams, but in the way that pulls. The way rivers find the ocean, the way lightning finds the ground, the way truth finds those who are ready to receive it. She attracts, not because she tries, but because she is. Her frequency is clear. Her heart is uncluttered. Her soul is open only to what is real. The man who meets her here must be rooted in himself. He cannot be swayed by games, lost in performance, or addicted to power. He must have faced his own shadows. He must know how to hold space, not just for her, but for himself. Because she will not do his emotional labor. She will not shrink to avoid intimidating him. She will not chase him out of loneliness. She is no longer available for unfinished men. And yet, she is not closed. She is receptive, but only to energy that matches her own, to presence that does not disappear when things get deep, to love that does not collapse under the weight of her wholeness. She would rather walk alone in truth than walk beside someone in illusion. And so, she does not fear solitude. She honors it. It is in solitude that she found herself, that she met the wildness of her spirit, that she fell back in love with the one person she had abandoned for too long, herself. She returns to her own body like a temple, to her own heart like a hearth, to her own life like a masterpiece. There is no longer an ache in her chest to be completed. There is a fullness, a knowing, quiet smile that forms when she thinks of all the times she almost gave herself away and didn't. Because the woman who never chases has become the woman who chooses. Not from fear, not from scarcity, but from sovereignty. She chooses peace over chaos, depth over drama, clarity over confusion. She is not a test. She is a threshold. To be with her is to rise. To chase her is to lose. To meet her fully, honestly, soulfully is to be transformed. And for the man who can hold that, she is not a mystery to solve. She is a home to return to. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.